Hello everyone, today I wanted to share with you one of my favorite things to paint on, which are wood rounds. I have some ornaments here that I've sold during Christmas time, and I also paint on big wood pieces like you see here. I just use a watercolor ground, or you can use gesso, which I will share, but it's wonderful. If you want to experiment by painting or using watercolor on something that's not just paper, highly recommend trying wood pieces. You can get these at any craft store for the most part. All of the pieces I have here are from our local store called Michael's. I'm sure you've heard of it, as most of my viewers are in the US, but I know you can get them anywhere else. But I have three different types here. There is birch wood, that's that lighter one. There's rosewood, basswood, it's a bit darker. And then you have pine wood, this last one. So there's all kinds of different ones. But if you can, better yet, find some logs or, trees that are cut down, ideally, in your forest, and you can make your own. All you need when it comes to painting on pretty much anything is some form of ground or gesso. I use either Daniel Smith watercolor ground, which is wonderful. It gives you a very textured, cold press like paper. The only problem is that if you don't use it fast, at least for me, I found that it does dry out and crumble. Ideally, you do not want that on your wood piece, but just so you know. And I've used most of it, so it's okay. But now gesso is typically an acrylic medium, as you see there. It is a lot softer, it's a lot smoother. I feel that it's very silky compared to the watercolor ground. That is a bit more rough, but they both work. So you can see how wet that still is. Now, I do prefer the watercolor ground. However, the gesso works beautifully as well. But you'll notice between the two, it does give you different textures and how your paint's gonna lay down. But I will also say that the gesso is much cheaper. Now, with any finished project, you're going to want to spray it so it doesn't activate with water or get messed up. This is what I use, but feel free to find whatever suits your preference. So once everything is fully dry, this is what I use to spray it down with. Here's some examples I did a couple years ago, or last year, I believe, around Christmas time. And I did these on ornaments. I also found these at my craft store. And another one, they're all primed. I prefer the matte. I don't like anything glossy or shiny. And let's go ahead and prep one. I won't be painting on this piece as the medium needs to dry. At least 24 hours, but ideally, if you can make it to 2 days, 48 hours, even better. Now, I use one of these snap brushes, inexpensive, something I don't really care too much about. I specifically only use these brushes to prime my pieces. You can use wood paneling as well. You don't have to use watercolor ground. Now, I've decided to use the gesso to demonstrate because I don't want to open the ground quite yet until I am ready, because I don't want it to dry out. Now, I live in a very dry mountainous climate, so that could be playing a role. So if you don't live in a very dry climate, you may not have any issues at all. When it comes to putting on your medium, I tend to glob it on there, and then I like to spread it out as carefully as I can around those edges. I don't want to cover up the bark because I like the look of that, to have it show through, but it's up to you. You don't even have to cover the entire wood part. You can cover a small section. Once I get enough on there, then I like to go where the rings are. I like to go in a circular motion to kind of meet up with the rings. But that's personal preference. You don't have to do that. But I do prefer not having streaks, or as little streaks as I can. That way it doesn't disrupt my painting process with the watercolor. And of course, if you're using gouache or something more opaque or acrylic, I don't even think you need to use this step. I've never used gouache on wood rounds. I'm not really a gouache artist, so I don't really know too much about that. But if you're doing watercolor, you do ideally need some form of something on there that's going to act as a surface. Otherwise it will, seep in and you won't be able to see it very well. So you can see the one on the left is the ground and the one on the right is the gesso. And you can see it's just a bit rougher, it's a bit more textured, and the watercolor it blooms differently on both. I recommend trying both, but my preferred and favorite is of course the ground, but it is way more expensive. Now for this little landscape, I am using my gravy detail brushes here, just 2 of them. I will list everything in the description below. For my sky, I'm using a combination of cobalt blue and some gray of gray. So the gray of gray is by Holbein and the cobalt blue is Daniel Smith. I love mixing these 2 colors. Keep in mind that that gray of gray is very opaque, so it may muddy up your blue, but I prefer that creaminess in my sky. It's a gentle way to get some color in your clouds without using the white of the, I would say paper here, but the white of the ground. And you just kind of let it move. So it doesn't take too much. Now I do want to let you know that the more water you add on here, the more it's going to bloom and spread. So you don't need too much water. It does act quite differently than paper, but it's a fun experience. It's great. I am using some light wash of Perlene green. When it comes to painting on the wood, you do have to build up that color. I do find that it soaks in a bit more. So I'm going back and forth between the Perlene green, mixed a little bit of the burnt umber in it to get a more earthy side. I don't prefer Perlene green on its own. I do love to change the hue of my greens just to make it a little bit more, personable. But it's up to you and what you want to do. I am eyeballing this. Of course, you can use a pencil and sketch out a scene. You can sketch over the top of any of these mediums, not a problem at all. But I like to just wing it and to create the shapes. So now I do have to do a little bit of lifting here because the color tended to bloom a little bit and I lost a little bit of that stream. I am dropping in some green gold by Daniel Smith and blending that together. Working my way up a little bit. Here's where I did a little bit of the lifting just so I didn't completely lose my little water path here. I'm not really sure what's going on with how this stream looks, but it's all good. It's still wet here, just so you know. It's a little bit drier, but it's still wet. It does take a while for the wood pieces to dry. Adding some details back in. This is a more concentrated amount of that Perlene green. Also, do you say Perlene green or Perlene green? Let me know. A little bit more of that green gold. Now, I did not change the hue of the green gold. Sometimes I'll mix in a little bit of lemon yellow. I know they're really bright and borderline not quite natural, but I kind of like how bright it is. So yeah, I didn't change anything up. Now I do want to let you know, I love scraping my rocks. I love the cheating method and it works beautifully on wood pieces. Who would have thought? But it does. Now I'm not applying too much pressure. I don't want to scrape or remove anything. If your the medium has dried for a long enough time, then you shouldn't have to worry about it. But if you didn't give it enough time to dry, then it might move that medium around, specifically the gesso. Now I'm taking a lighter wash of Payne's Gray mixed with burnt umber. I do wish I used a little bit more bluer tones than the gray tones. It looks a little bit too earthy. I'm not sure. It wasn't quite right, but it's fine. I'm leaving it. It's all good. But I do kind of wish it was a little bit more on the bluer side. And I used a combination of some dry brushing and adding a bit more water to let that paint move around. For my trees, I love doing this, especially on these tiny pieces. You don't have to do details, just some squiggly lines up and down to give the definition or the impression of having some pine trees there. Adding a little bit more details here, you will find as you move along that you will have to go over some of your areas because it just tends to dry a little bit lighter. But it is so much fun to create these tiny little worlds on wood pieces, and you know, it's really great for gifts. It's great for, of course, holidays, ornaments, things like that, to hang up on your own wall. They're just a lot of fun and really organic, and I just love them. A little bit of the P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White for some tiny little flowers, and a couple birds, of course. And that's pretty much it for this little piece. And you can create all kinds of tiny different little landscapes. And then of course, let it dry for at least a couple days. And then you can spray some of that protectant coating over it so nothing gets smeared or reactivated, because we definitely do not want that. But let me know in the comments below, have you painted on wood pieces before? Do you plan on painting on wood pieces? It's one of my favorite things. You can see here I went really dark with my trees and I was able to lift up some of the paint. It does lift beautifully. Both of these are on the watercolor ground. And this one is on the gesso. So this other landscape on the right is on the gesso, but you can see, you know, it's a beautiful, fun experience no matter which one you use. But that is it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video and being patient with me while I slowly get them out. But I look forward to seeing you in my next one.